This video was sponsored by CuriosityStream in partnership with Fight.
Apparently, this is about
Service
China
Nebula.
destroying its tech sector and
In
what the
2010,
reasons for
a
why.
huge fight started brewing between China's two leading software companies. On the one side, there was Tencent, the behemoth behind WeChat, League of Legends, and more, who back in 2010 was riding high on their first hit, an instant messaging app called QQ. And on the other side was Qihoo, the country's leading antivirus company, with their flagship app called 360 Safeguard. Both QQ and 360 Safeguard were massive hits in China until in 2010 they finally grew too big to coexist peacefully. The problem started with Qihoo blocking ads in the QQ app as a kind of cross-app ad blocker. Soon after, Tencent responded by developing their own competing antivirus software. They called it QQ Doctor and they bundled it with their instant messaging app, which got them 100 million installs almost overnight and a 40% market share in China right away. In response, 360's antivirus app quickly sent users a suite of pop-ups warning them that QQ software was basically malware that they should just stop installing. And not to be outdone, Tencent responded by basically blocking QQ from working on anyone's computer with 360 software installed, forcing users to choose either one or the other. Within days, this conflict spiraled out of control, the companies started to sue each other, and they took it all the way up to the Supreme Court of China. But perhaps most surprisingly, the Supreme Court of China didn't actually find either of these companies guilty of monopolistic behavior. Qihoo versus Tencent was the first antitrust case in China's internet economy heard by the Supreme Court, and they decided that not only was the bundling of software and outright blocking of competitors' apps not against antitrust rules, but they even dismissed the idea that these companies had a dominant market position relevant to the proceedings at all. In other words, the Supreme Court took an extremely lenient approach, and that decision set a very clear precedent, making anti-competitive, monopolistic behavior the rule rather than the exception.
I mean, but wasn't that always the case from the jump? Like, that literally was always the case. Of course, with one exception, which is that, you know, the government kind of controls or has regulatory mechanisms in place to control, you know, both of these companies.
Exception in China's internet.
So it's literally like, dude, it's basically what I talk about always, which gives you, okay, it basically gives you the fallacy of choice, like the neoliberal freedom, but it's, instead of having like both companies operating at the behest of the profit motive, you have both companies giving you the illusion of freedom or the illusion of choice, while simultaneously both of them are still controlled by the government. I would much rather have the government control both of those corporations and allow people to think that there's like some level of choice happening there than 6 oligopoly mega corporations controlling every fucking sector and doing whatever the fuck they want, poisoning the water supply, doing anything and everything to just like increase their profit margins.
Long years, Tencent's WeChat routinely outright blocked links to competing social media apps, killing many competitors in their tracks. Retailers like Alibaba frequently told brands that they would have to choose between listing either on their platform or those of their competitors, a practice commonly called in China choose one from two, and so on. For the last decade or so, China's internet became the Wild West, or shall we say Wild East of monopolistic behavior, with the Chinese government doing very little to stop it at all. So it came as a huge surprise when in 2020, the government took a massive U-turn. A sudden and violent series of crackdowns started, in which every major internet company in China became targeted, hundreds of fines were handed out, legal systems were completely reformed, managers were fired or stepped down, companies were forcefully delisted from stock markets, and so on. The crackdowns lasted almost 2 years, and together with other recent economic difficulties, they wiped out at least $1.5 trillion in value from tech companies. That is 4 full Facebook's worth of market capitalization. I mean, 4 Meta's worth, of course.
I can't watch the rest of this. I can't. I'm gonna start coming violently. And I feel like that's inappropriate for me to do on camera, okay? He said violent fines were implemented on the tech sector, and I was just like, That sounds so good. What the fuck? I'm gonna come.
And after almost 2 full years of brutal crackdowns, everything kind of just recently stopped, almost as abruptly as it started. Just a few days ago, the IPO of Ant Group, the first victim of the crackdown, was reportedly back on track again, and not long before that, state-affiliated news pages started talking of government support suddenly returning to the sector as well. So as the crackdown seems to be coming to an end, it's time to look back at the last 2 years and ask what exactly happened, why China decided to crack down on its own tech giants, and what they might have achieved in the process. The first signs of the crackdown were pretty well publicized across the world, starting with Jack Ma giving a now infamous 2020 speech in Shanghai. In it, he condemned China's financial regulators for holding innovation back by requiring tech companies like his own Ant Group to follow similar risk management strategies as traditional banks when holding money. He implied that it was an
Dude, oh my god, I can't watch this. I can't. It's just like, it's too much. It's literally too much. It's too much. It's too much. This is more pornographic than when Sean Hannity sucks off Donald Trump on television. Oh my fucking lord, dude. Also, you don't always find a Western independent outlet even that covers terms on these on exactly the real boundaries that they're supposed to happen on. I mean, he's still Western, he's German, but he's still fucking Western, like, you know what I mean? It's just, think about how CNBC covered Jack Ma, where they said, oh, he spoke against the government, so then they disappeared him. He is at the very least like giving you the Wall Street Journal. Even in the Wall Street Journal, because they still cover exactly what he said, they're basically, he's basically saying, like, the reason why is because he was speaking out routinely against Chinese regulation. What those regulations were holding tech companies, tech monopolies that that the Chinese government allowed to exist, basically to... What is this? Most sane anime simp? What the fuck is that? I'm still gonna stop clicking on fucking dumbass links. The same risk management protocols that they subjected traditional banks to. I don't have an issue with that.
An outdated idea that fintech companies like his should have to be as careful with money as banks, and that annoying government officials just needed to move out of the way. He must have gotten pretty cocky seeing how he was able to just brush regulators away in the past, but government officials decided that kind of challenging the entire financial system of the country would maybe be one step too far. Jack Ma mysteriously disappeared from public almost overnight after his speech, and when he appeared, he quickly stepped down from almost all of his roles at his companies and the elite business university that he helped found a few years prior as well. His fintech company Ant Group abruptly had its IPO plans cancelled, and his e-commerce business Alibaba soon received an antitrust fine of almost $3 billion. That is the single largest fine of its...
Remember what I said? Remember what I said? First of all, imagine if this happened to Elon Musk. Oh my God, I'm going to come only so hard. But remember what I said? Every company is engaging in illicit affairs, but China does pick and choose who they get to, punish if they perceive that company to be a threat. Okay? This is exactly that. They're doing selective enforcement because they recognize that they can go to any of the other fucking billionaires that are party members and say, hey, Chinese prosperity time. Please give us a voluntary donation. And they go, here is $7 billion. Sorry about that. If you don't do that, then, this happens to you. Okay? That's it.
It's kind of by fault.
It sounds like Nazi Germany. Yeah. The famously socialist, pro-socialist Nazi Germany, dude. Brother, what do you mean? You're literally talking about the most effective mechanism of control that capital owners absolutely loved in human history. An experiment that straight up utilized nationalistic fervor to justify like corporate control over an entire fucking nation that had imperialistic wants and desires that felt cucked out of the race to colonize the rest of the fucking planet in comparison to all of its other European bordering nation states. And you're literally comparing that to what China is doing and saying, wow, this is exactly the same. Fascism has always been a mechanism of control for capital owners when push comes to shove.
In the history of China, and it's big enough that even EU officials would be impressed by the sum. And if there's anything that EU officials are familiar with, it's handing out big fines in the name of antitrust. Jack Ma's fall from grace was swift and decisive, and seeing the massive credit crisis in the Chinese real estate market that developed soon after, it's clear to see in retrospect that Jack's speech about loosening financial regulations must have sounded particularly dangerous to the government at the time. That said, while he might have started the avalanche, the crackdowns didn't stop with him at all. Every single major internet company in China was targeted, and the government pushed through major changes in 7 areas. First, antitrust. China suddenly decided to crack down on those choose one from two and other similar practices it tolerated for decades. It got much stricter on blocking mergers that they deemed anti-competitive, they handed out hundreds of fines, and they passed much stricter anti-monopoly laws as well. Second, deceptive practices. Chinese internet companies were just as full of fake reviews, fake discounts, fake prices, well, just about everything, as they were of anti-competitive behavior in the past, and the government launched lots of investigations and handed out fines relating to those. Third, privacy. After decades of virtually unrestricted access to user data, the Chinese government passed the so-called—
This is so fucked up. I hate this. I'm sorry. I fucking hate this. It's so disgusting. This is literally like watching your wife of 30 years get fucked aggressively on camera. I'm looking at this and I'm sitting in the fucking cuck chair like I'm Sneeko, watching another country live out my dream. Okay? I'm Sneeko. We're all Sneeko. Everyone that lives in the Western world watching this video is like, come on, bro. No, this is like absolutely preposterous, dude. We're all in the fucking cuck chair, man. I hate to see other motherfuckers living out my dream, dog. This is not good. Okay? First, I was coming uncontrollably. Then I realized, when the fucking camera pans over, I realized, oh my God. I could be living like this. And now I feel shitty. What do we get, dude? You know what we get in America? We get this shit. Trump on the fucking dumbass Full Send podcast. That's what we get. Okay? China's out here being like, oh yeah, what's up? We're going to do insane amounts of regulatory control over the fucking tech duopolies and oligopolies that exist in every fucking sector. We're going to do massive crackdowns. We're going to fine you into fucking oblivion. We are going to ensure that there are no more mergers happening. There's going to be top of the hour ad breaks and subscriptions for every single person, because at the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe. And it's actually Chinese prosperity for Oilers to gift subscriptions to those who have not. Okay? So that everyone can avoid, the top of the hour ad break and enjoy an ad-free broadcasting experience. Okay? And I'm over here watching all this happen, and I'm like, why can't we have this? It's fucked up. Alika, thank you for the 5. Get the subs. Me, when I realized the bullet train I'm taking between Beijing and Shanghai tomorrow is actually a 2004 Toyota Camry, I have to drive through 14 hours of traffic from Dallas to Houston. Exactly. Preston for the win. Sorry, I'm a potato. Alika and great value Lewis Hamilton. Thank you for the 5 get the subs, allowing 20 people to have Chinese prosperity at the top of the fucking hour.
Personal Information Protection Law, or PIPL for short, essentially China's own version of the EU's GDPR, which it is partially based on. This meant much stricter privacy laws and the
Kyle Marks and Alienated Quebecois 666. Thank you for the fucking 5 gifted. Bottom G! Bottom G! With the 50 gifted! Top G!
The government also named and shamed 43 apps for illegal data collection, while even temporarily pulling some violators, like TikTok, from app stores completely for breaking these laws. That's pretty significant. Of course, in practice, PIPL doesn't restrict government access to user data, but on the private company front at least, it does theoretically make it so that China now has clearer and stricter nationwide privacy laws than the US, for example. Fourth, labor laws. Chinese tech companies were famous for their 996 office culture, asking office employees to work from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, with many leaders like Jack Ma not just openly endorsing such systems, but even calling it a blessing. Of course, the problem is that when your official policy is to make people work like 70 hours a week, every week, constantly, that's kind of illegal, even in China. And while the Chinese government in the past decided to not enforce those rules, they suddenly decided that maybe it was time to enforce those rules. Fifth, algorithms. New laws theoretically force companies to disclose to users when they use recommendation algorithms to push content to them, and to allow their users to opt out of being targeted with such algorithmic recommendations. Sixth, financing and governance. In the past, most big Chinese internet companies listed their shares, or at least the shares of their shell companies, in the US when they went public, which allowed them to raise money from mature international capital markets. China decided that it no longer liked this, as it wanted to build up its own capital markets at home, so many national champions like Didi, the kind of Uber of China, saw massive investigations and crackdowns after going public in the US, which forced them and many others to withdraw. And not only has China made it clear that it wants companies to list at home going forward, but it also started demanding so-called golden shares in most internet companies like TikTok maker ByteDance or blogging platform Weibo, which would give the government a seat on these companies' boards with the power to veto future decisions. And finally, 2 problematic industries were singled out and, well, basically utterly crushed. Video games, as these were deemed to be too addictive, and after-school education, as this was seen to be putting way too much pressure on.
They went after video games and edtech.
Kids in China. No new video games or major updates were allowed to be released for almost an entire year in the country. The government limited playing hours for minors to just 3 dedicated hours a week and mandated that facial recognition.
Okay, I disagree with that. That's kind of fucked up. Yeah, that's pretty fucked up, to be honest. Yeah, no, never mind. EdTech is fine. That was good, actually. But the other thing, nope. Didn't the evisceration of like Chinese EdTech and like after school programs, which in Turkey we call dersane, for the record, didn't they basically make all of that public? Someone in this chat should know. What they ended up doing was beef up the public sector, like public education sector, which actually opened up a lot of opportunities in even one of the ghost cities that we were looking at, where people now people started moving into areas where there were better education. Abi denediler ama tam da olmadı. Bizde olmaz oğlum. Biz Çin değiliz. With the amount of video games you play, you might as well be a Chinese child. First of all, I definitely play more than 3 hours of video games. I just don't do it on stream, Mongolshevik. I have been playing Yakuza 0 like a motherfucker, like nonstop. Literally all hours of the day, All hours in the morning, now I'm playing Yakuza 0. All hours at night, I'm playing Yakuza 0. It's fucking sick. I think 3 hours is too small for the entire week.
Recognition and age restriction software was built into games to enforce these rules, while they also simultaneously outlawed basically the country's whole gargantuan after-school education industry as well, to reduce pressure on school children, which bankrupted 25 massive online education companies and caused the collapse of the whole industry. Those 7 combined restrictions had pretty wild effects on
the only ones that survived were ones that were also in India as well.
The country's internet economy, pushing most companies' stocks down at least 2/3 from their peaks in 2021, wiping out more than $1.5 trillion of value in the process and causing hundreds of thousands of layoffs. In other words, the government suddenly and deliberately wrecked the very tech giants that they in the past have basically protected at all costs, which really begs the question of why. What happened that made the government change so suddenly? To start with, Jack Ma's speech might have been the straw to break the camel's back, but the government has long felt that private internet companies were starting to amass too much power anyway, and much of the crackdown was simply a swift and brutal reminder to everyone in the industry of just who was in charge. But besides just the desire for more control, the government also faced threats, both externally and internally, that they needed to address. Externally, the US bans around Huawei, ZTE and others made it painfully clear that China's economy and technology sector was dangerously reliant on core technologies from abroad. This was a major vulnerability, but according to the CCP, internet companies hoovered up most of the resources and spent them on pointless feuds that the government calls a, quote, disorderly expansion of capital around a million new ways to deliver food or shop online or whatever, instead of sinking their billions.
Wait, hold on.
Feuds that the government calls a, quote, disorderly expansion of capital around a million new ways to deliver food or shop online or whatever, instead of sinking their billions into critical capabilities around semiconductors, material sciences, self-driving cars, etc. These foundational technologies that China needed to gain independence or maybe even exert control over others in the future, these were not only not sanctioned, but actually continued to receive massive support, and the crackdowns partially served to make it very clear to everyone that these were the areas that the government wanted resources.
Bro, this is literally carrot and a stick. Okay? In America, we don't have a stick. We only have a carrot. That's it. And the carrot doesn't work without the stick. You push for growth sectors, you hyper focus on it, you allow it to expand rapidly, you allow it to grow, and then when it gets to a size where it's like unmanageable or it starts to be a problem, you then fucking whip out the stick. That's it. And then you continue to prioritize other growth sectors that you find to be future tech that will also make you competitive in the global marketplace. America only has carrots, and they keep giving more and more carrots to the fucking corporations with no stick. There is no better example of this than like airline companies that engaged in stock buybacks, which used to be illegal back in the day, you know. Wonder how that went away. That got like nothing. They got so much government funding and during COVID and no control whatsoever. And they still did the fucking layoffs. The EdTech crackdown can be a mixed bag. They got big because of the lack of high-quality public education, which is additionally important in China because of the importance given to education there. Yeah. The Chinese principle behind Chinese cultural attitudes towards education is closer to a meritocracy than anything else. It literally goes. I mean, this is something that they had like fucking 1,000 years ago. That like a peasant could rise from the ranks of peasantry all the way to like nobility if they were plucked away through the educational system with a bunch of different methods of testing and shit. So like they do care about education, and they place a lot of fucking cultural importance on civil service and education. Education is the greatest. The education is the greatest way to engage in upward social mobility, which existed in China even while Western nations were like dying because they didn't know how to fucking wipe their asses and shit. So that part absolutely is a continuation of like the Chinese attitude that has existed for a very long time. This crackdown will be positive only if they rapidly expand their public schooling, which people are happy with. Again, this is not defensive ed tech. They're predatory and leeches, but kind of necessary evil. Yeah. Before COVID, the average Chinese family spent 1/3 of its discretionary income on extra education. Yeah. Can you explain what EdTech is real quick? It's private institutions that offer supplementary education. So you go to school, but then you have like some kind of like scholastic aptitude test, some form of that, in between 8th grade and high school. That's how it is in Turkey. I don't know if that's the same in China. But then also on top of that, in between high school and college, and in order to study for those tests, or in order to get better at your school in general, in order to get better at your schooling in general, you go and get additional courses after school, where I don't know what it's called in America. I don't know what they do, but yeah, it's private e-tutors in China. A lot of that was like done online, but there are actual like physical schools as well. In Turkey, there were physical schools. I went to them. Like, it was fucking terrible. Like cram school in Japan. And because of the value that they place on education, they wanted to level the playing field. The research grants given by the government offer a special fast lane attention for grants, semiconductor, and cybernetic studies. They are speeding up. I know because I applied to many grants in astro research. Topji. So, wish my Kumon Center was nationalized. Oh, okay, that's what it's called. Okay, so my mom is going to be an English teacher at a high-end school in Chongqing, and I feel bad for being afraid for her because I feel slightly bigoted. Wait, why? Why do you feel scared for her? What do you think is going to happen? You think they're going to fucking arrest her or some shit? Like, what the fuck? She taught them English too well. It's basically a ton of additional school. Yes, and it's also additional school that you have to pay a lot of money.
Is to be spent on much more. And internally, the Chinese economy, and through it, Chinese society as a whole, was reaching a pretty significant turning point as well.
I'm gonna be honest with you, your mom is significantly worse off being a teacher in Oklahoma than she is in any part of China, okay? Like, I was just thinking about that, and it's like, your mom could be living in Oklahoma, driving Uber, tired as fuck, after her entire workday, specifically so that she can make ends meet and have a living wage, because in Oklahoma, teacher salaries have stagnated for the past 20 fucking years. Or she could go live a comfortable life in China, teaching English, and, become more worldly as well. I'm willing to bet that she's not going to have to buy her own class supplies or get fucking shot. That's the other thing that we're not even talking about. Hey, what's up? At least your mom doesn't have to fucking dodge bullets. You know what I mean? There's another fun component to being a teacher somewhere else on the planet than the United States of America.
After decades of incredibly fast expansion, the country's growth started to slow dramatically in the last few years. Ignoring the crazy swings around the pandemic, a strong downward trend has become clear for everyone to see, even in the official figures, and with it, the sense of incredible economic progress has disappeared across China's population as well. In this environment, together with all the COVID-related pressures and other problems, citizens started to question what the long working hours, the lack of privacy, the brutal educational pressure, and the ruthless profiteering of companies were for when they themselves no longer saw great leaps in prosperity. Among China's youth, the phenomenon of lying flat has become increasingly popular, where people basically lose faith in hard work paying off at all and simply switch to doing the bare minimum just to get by.
Bro, they're quiet quitting in China too. Yo! Dude, they're quiet quitting in China too? What the fuck? Okay, I do love this because I'm gonna be honest, like, I personally think that this is interesting because we know how the American government is not dealing with this, right? Because like one component of this is to like create more opportunities, allow fluidity in changing sectors and whatnot. Not have your insurance tied to your employment, like not have your healthcare tied to your employment, things of that nature would allow people to focus on initiatives in industries, especially if you have industries that you care about, that you want to fucking grow. Like in America, we have a major infrastructure problem. Construction would be great. You know what I mean? How do you fucking get people to get into construction? I mean, better pay, housing, things of that nature that the government could handle. So I would love to see how China deals with this problem. Whereas in the United States, I know how we're not dealing with the problem. We're trying to fucking create like a massive recession so that people are starving. Kevin McCarthy is literally talking about how he wants to tie benefits and entitlements programs to, I'm not even going to call it entitlement, benefits, social safety nets to more work conditions, even though the job availability to the fucking current number of unemployed is identical to has gotten back to pre-pandemic levels, and yet people are still saying, oh, we have so many jobs that are open, but no one wants to fill them. You're misinformed. China is collapsing. Look, I know, dude. China is collapsing every fucking week.
I personally have Chinese friends of my own who subscribe to this lying flat idea, and it's just wild to me to see how people suddenly turn from kind of just accepting the hustle and working like crazy to turning their back on it almost completely. When the incredible growth stops, citizens understandably start demanding more of a focus on getting better consumer protections and working conditions, etc. And many of these changes and laws aim to signal to the population loud and clear that that's what the government is focused on now. Shorter working hours, less educational pressure, fewer scams online, etc. The government calls this a shift from a high speed to a high quality model for economic growth, and it emphasizes the concept of common prosperity. So that's why I think the government did it, to gain back control, to focus resources on what the government considers to be sensitive, critical technologies, and to further the idea of common prosperity. China seemingly compressed 2 decades of tech regulations into 2 years, so these changes seem exceptionally violent, and I think that is deliberate as they attempt to
I'm going to use the term violent. You know what I mean? Like, that seems kind of, this is a strange choice of words, but otherwise this video is fucking, what a banger. I love this. I don't know who this guy is, but holy fuck, he's popping. I think he probably means like aggressive, and it's like an ESL problem. No, I'm not even kidding. I think he literally, I think he's, because the rest of the energy is incredibly pro-China, I would say, in comparison to the rest of the, Western media. So he probably is trying to say it's very aggressive, but like maybe having like an ESL moment. Because I didn't see anything in this fucking entire video where he makes it seem like what China is doing is bad. If anything, he offers genuine context that you rarely ever get from most outlets.
send a very clear message
I'll
to
be
both
back.
the industry and their citizens that they take these things very seriously all of a sudden. Now the question is whether these consequences will work as planned and whether there are any unintended consequences. And while it's impossible to say for certain, we can already see some first signs. If you're interested in my assessment of the effectiveness of these sanctions, I've made a separate bonus video diving into exactly that, covering how government agencies, investors, consumers, and the markets have reacted so far, and you can watch that as a bonus video exclusively on Nebula. This video joins many other bonus segments that I've released on our own video streaming site called Nebula in the past, so interested viewers can dive deeper into each of my topics, and it also joins fantastic Nebula original series like China Actually from other Nebula creators like Polymatter. For everyone wanting to better understand how China works, which I guess is everyone still watching this video, I think this series is an absolutely brilliant resource. Nebula is built and owned by me as well as hundreds of my very favorite educational creators, many of which I bet are also your favorite educational creators, and the platform truly significantly helps us finance our work while also giving you extra content to watch. There are no ads on Nebula, our existing YouTube videos are all up there as well.
Fuck. Well, there are no ads on Nebula, but I just accidentally showed you guys an ad while I was doing a pee-pee. The way China does domestic and foreign policy, in my opinion, is just a smarter way of organizing a capitalist state. Not to be the ML guy, but I think we still need to keep in mind the purpose of the state, though it's definitely a more worker-friendly empire than the U.S. I mean, there's plenty of issues, too, like, if we're being real, Chinese healthcare is really fucking bad. There's a lot of issues that still need to be solved